The answer to a 40-year question was sitting in a lab across the hall. Nobody walked over. Since 1984, researchers have asked the same thing. Why do some brains heal after trauma while others stay locked? The signal that would have answered them was recorded in 1987 in a completely different building, studying a completely different problem. It took an AI cross-referencing 10 unrelated fields to notice they were looking at the same door. The trauma researchers were measuring fear. The other lab was measuring flexibility, how quickly a mind could shift between tasks. Different questions, different funding, different journals. They never cited each other, never shared a conference panel. For 37 years, two halves of the same mechanism sat in separate filing cabinets. The flexibility lab had found something strange. Certain compounds made rigid thinking patterns dissolve. The brain's usual boundaries, the walls between networks, became permeable. They published it as a curiosity, a footnote about serotonin receptors. The trauma lab, meanwhile, kept hitting the same wall. Talk therapy helped some patients, others remained frozen. The difference between recovery and permanent damage seemed random, unpredictable, almost personal. The connection was always there. The same receptor that controlled cognitive flexibility also controlled whether traumatic memories could be rewritten. When the walls between brain networks dissolve, something else happens. Old patterns can finally be edited. 9 separate research domains, depression, OCD, PTSD, addiction, anxiety, all converging on the same mechanism: serotonin-driven plasticity. The brain's capacity to reorganize itself, not through years of therapy, through a window that opens and closes. 7 out of every 10 findings pointed the same direction. The signal was not subtle. It was loud. It had been loud for decades. But then there is this. Same receptor system, same class of compounds. One molecule, psilocybin, reduces suicidal thinking. Another, LSD, appears to increase it. Same target, same brain, opposite outcome. The answer was there. But so was a shadow. Something about how these molecules interact with individual brains produces wildly different results. The mechanism that heals one person destabilizes another. And after 40 years of data sitting in adjacent buildings, no one has explained why. The current model says this: the receptor is not the treatment. It is the gate. What walks through the gate depends on what is already waiting inside. Patients with rigid, repetitive thought patterns, OCD, treatment-resistant depression, show the strongest response. The gate opens, the old loops weaken, new connections form. But if the system is already unstable, opening that same gate floods the architecture. The flexibility becomes chaos. This is why the trauma researchers and the flexibility researchers needed each other. One group had the key. The other knew which locks it should never open. The implications reach beyond any single disorder. If neuroplasticity is the gateway, if symptom remission requires the brain to physically reorganize, then we have been treating the mind like software when it was always hardware, rewriting code that was etched in tissue. This changes how we think about recovery, not as learning to cope, as learning to rebuild. And it raises a harder question. How many other answers are sitting in labs across the hall right now? How many cures are waiting for someone to walk over and ask? The answer to a 40-year question was sitting in a lab across the hall. Someone finally walked over.